Okay, so let's see this particular passage. So, again, this is the passage which is related to humanities. So, it talks about the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, founded in 1848, emerged as a radical and visionary response to the artistic orthodoxy of Victorian England, right? Now, basically, what this particular paragraph is talking, this line, sentence is talking about, that the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. Now let's understand what is this Raphaelite, right? So anyone, any idea about what is a Raphaelite? Can tell me about it. So what is a Raphaelite? So Raphaelite, basically we can say that it is also prominently we can say is known as a PRB. Okay, so Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood we can say was a kind of a revolutionary 19th century British art. Okay, so that is basically the case, and the Raphaelite is basically you can say that it is related to what we I can actually try to explain you. Okay, so basically it was a group of painter, you can say poets and other art critics. Okay, so that is the kind of the group that is being formed. Okay, and the it was into public controversy or controversy also. Okay, so you can just look at the images, and I think so by that you'll be able to understand the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood in a better manner. Okay, so that's the case. Okay, and their style of the painting you can understand is a kind of the I mean like it's kind of you can say that this no I mean like just let's just look at the pictures. I think so that would going to give you this. Okay, so that's the case. Okay, so let's go to this particular passage and understand this. So Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, founded in 1848, emerged as a radical and visionary response to the artistic orthodoxy of Victorian England. Okay, so basically they are saying that the Pre-Raphaelite जो Brotherhood था, जो start हुआ था 1848 के अंदर, so it emerged as a radical and a visionary response. Okay, so Pre-Raphaelite brother that actually founded in 1848 emerged as a radical. So maybe we can say that it was a very bold and new movement, okay, that challenged the traditional, okay, is that visionary response to the artistic orthodoxy. So orthodoxy is the dominance, okay. So that's the case. I'm like orthodox is like Purane jo views chal rahe. So we can say that this PRB was a bold and a new movement that actually challenged the traditional art rules of Victorian England. In a society tightly bound by convention, industrialization, and rigid moral code, the PRB forged countercultural identity, one that sought to revitalize art by returning to what they believe was a purer, more truthful form of expression. Okay, so basically they say that at the time, okay, society followed very strict rules. So that is ठीक है, at that in a society tightly bound by convention. Okay, so at that time society followed very strict rule. Okay, was changing, and why it was changing because of industrialization. Okay, and this and had a very strict moral values, okay, rigid moral code. So PRB created a very, we can say, a very different and a rebellious style. Okay, they wanted to make art fresh and alive again by going back to what they thought was a more honest and a pure way of making art. Okay, so that is what they are saying, that in a society tightly bound by convention, industrialization, and rigid moral code, the PRB forged a countercultural identity. Okay, so they created a different and a very rebellious style, we can say, one that sought to revitalize art by returning to what they believe was a purer, more truthful form of expression. Now, this group of young artists includes William Holman Hunt, John Everett Millais, and Gabriel Rossetti, rejected the Royal Academy adherence to Renaissance traditions, particularly the later mannerist styles of Raphael and those who followed him. Okay, so basically, the author says in this passage that this group of young artists, which has this Hunt, Millais, and Rossetti, okay, so they did not agree with the Royal Academy's way of teaching art. Okay, so the Academy follow, we can say, Renaissance, okay, Renaissance tradition or Renaissance style, okay, especially the later dramatic and artificial styles inspired by Raphael. Okay, Instead, they found inspiration in the sincerity, vividness, and detailed naturalism of medieval and early Renaissance art. Okay, so they say instead they admire older art. Okay, so जो Middle Ages की art थी. Okay, so medieval की, middle की, या early Renaissance area की. So they admire older art from the Middle Ages and early Renaissance. They like its honesty. Okay, they like its vivid colors or a bright colors, okay, and a very detailed, natural or the realistic way of showing a nature. Okay. So basically, what is the main idea is this is that the author wants to say in this passage is parage that the PRB kind of rejected, okay, we can say traditional Victorian art, okay. So इन्होंने traditional जो Victorian art था उसको reject किया and they returned to the earlier जो medieval or early Renaissance का art था which they believe was more honest and kind of more details. Okay, some of the words that you need to know from this paragraph is radical. Okay, so radical we know is something that is very different. Okay, from usual ideas. Okay, next is an orthodoxy that you should know, which is actually traditional or accepted beliefs and rules. Okay. Rest all I think so is again counterculture is one that goes against the culture. Okay, or mainstream culture that goes against mainstream culture. Okay. Renaissance is basically, you can say, a rebirth. Okay. Or it was, we can say, a kind of historical period of cultural and artistic revival in Europe. Okay. So that is the case. Now let's go to the para number two. So para number two say that at the core of the PRB's artistic philosophy was a belief in truth to nature. Okay. So this principle basically, I'm like the main idea behind the PRB's art, okay, was to show nature, honesty, and realism. Okay, so at the core of PRB's, sorry, so at the core of PRB's artistic philosophy was the belief in truth to nature. Okay, so the main idea behind, we can say, the PRB art was to show nature honestly and realistically. The principle demanded not only visual accuracy but also emotional and more moral sincerity. So they say that the idea that they want to show the nature in an honest and a realistic manner. So it meant that their paintings also should look real and correct. Okay, but I mean, the painting should not only look real and correct, but it should also show true feelings and strong moral sincerity, okay, or strong moral meaning, we can say. Their paintings were notable for their meticulous attention to detail, luminous color palettes, and complex compositions, elements often drawn from literature, history, religion, and poetry. Okay, so their painting were famous for very, we can say, careful, small details. Okay, so meticulous attention to detail, luminous color plates is, we can say, is that bright glowing colors, okay, and complex compositions, so complicated designs, okay. And they say that they often got their ideas about the paintings from books, from history, from religion, and from poems. The Brotherhood's work was in many ways a challenge to the polished idealist depictions favored by academic art. Okay, so their art, we can say that went again the smooth, perfect looking style that traditional art schools prefer. So that was the opposite. Okay, so the Brotherhood's work was in many ways a challenge to the polished idealist depictions favored by the academic art. In Millais' Christ in the house of his parents, for example, the realistic portrayal of the Holy Family in the humble carpenter's workshop sparked outrage among critics who saw it as too gritty, too common, too real. Okay, so एक Millais की painting थी where they were showing Christ in the house of his parents. Okay, and we showed Jesus and his family in a very simple carpenter ka shop in a very realistic way. Okay, so many critics were angry because they thought that it looked too rough, ordinary, and realistic, right? So that's the case. Yet this realism was exactly what the PRB sought, a visual language that reflected the complexity and sanctity of everyday. Okay. But that is what this PRB is, okay? So this realistic style was exactly what the PRB wanted, okay? They wanted art that shows everyday life is deep, meaningful, and even sanctities there are holy, okay? So basically, this particular paragraph talks about, we can say that. PRB, okay, so they kind of believe in realistic, okay, or detailed art that actually shows the truth and meaning in everyday life, okay. So that's, I would say, would be the essence of this particular para, okay. So truth and meaning in everyday life, okay. Now, I think so the words here were comparatively easy than the previous one, okay. So let's do the sanctity is sacred or holiness, we can say, okay. And the another that you should know is the meticulous, which is very particular and a very careful attention to the detail. Okay, luminous, I hope you all know, is the bright and glowing. Okay, let's go to the para number third. So more than just an artistic movement, the pre-Raphaelites formed an ideological rebellion. Okay, so they say that the pre-Raphaelites were not only we can say that they were not just artists. Okay, but they kind of started, but they also started a rebellion based on strong ideas and beliefs. Their art was inseparable from their critique of Victorian modernity, its industrial sprawl, its loss of craftsmanship, and its spiritual emptiness. Okay, so they say that their art was closely connected to their criticism of modern Victorian, okay, society. So they did not like the fast growth of factories, we can say, industrial sprawl. Okay, so they did not like the fast growth of factories in cities. Okay, and loss of craftsmanship. Okay, and its spiritualness, emptiness. Okay, the lack of spiritual meaning in people's life. So their art was closely connected to their criticism of modern Victorian society, and the criticism involved these things. The Brotherhood admired the Middle Ages not just for its visual aesthetics, but for what they saw as a period of social cohesion, spiritual depth, and artisanal integrity. Okay, so this they're talking about the Brotherhood, and they say that they like the Middle Ages. Okay, not only because of the art, okay, so not because of its visual aesthetics, okay, not because how the art look, okay, but also because they believe that it was a time when people were kind of, we can say, united, so social cohesive, okay, and they were religious, deeply religious, and they were proud of their handmade stuff, okay. Their embrace of medieval themes and symbolism was not mere romanticism, it was a deliberate protest against the mechanized materialistic world around them. In this way, the PRB offered not just a new style, but a new way of seeing art as a form of resistance. Okay, so they say that their embrace of medieval themes and symbolism was not mere romanticism, it was a deliberate protest against the mechanized, materialistic world around them. Okay, so they say that their use of medieval ideas, we can say, okay, and symbols, okay, was not just because they loved the past, okay, and romanticized the past, okay, but it was a clear and a planned protest. So it was a deliberate protest against the machine-based and money-focused society they were living in. Okay. Now, in this way, the PRB offered not just a new style, but a new way of seeing art as a form of resistance. So the PRB did not only create a new art style, okay, they showed that art should be a way to oppose and challenge the society. So basically, we can say that this PRB, okay, they use their art basically to protest against, we can say, okay, against the materialistic and industrialistic Victorian society. Okay, so some of the words here, I think so, it's all clear, right? So romanticism is, we can say, that ideal love for the past or the imagination. Okay, resistance, I hope that you all know, opposition or protest. Okay, aesthetics is beauty here, and artisanal integrity, we can say, is kind of honesty and quality in the handmade work. Okay, now their counterculture stance extended into their treatment of narrative and subject matter. So they say that they're countercultural. So their rebellious attitude, okay, also affected the kinds of stories and the topics they actually chose to paint. Rather than conforming to the established genres of historical or mythological painting, the PRB often chose scenes from lesser known literary works, medieval legends, or spiritual allegories. Okay, now they say that instead of following the usual style of painting famous historical or mythological scenes, okay, the PRB basically selected stories from less famous books. Okay, they pick up medieval legends or religious symbolic stories. Now, these subjects allow them to explore human emotion with intensity and moral complexity. Okay, so these topics help them show strong human feelings and difficult moral situations. Now, these subjects allow them to explore human emotion. Their artwork often depicted moments of psychological tension or transformation, inviting viewers to reflect on the ethical and existential dimensions of human experience. Okay, so they say that their painting often showed important, we can say, this no human emotion. Okay, or this right. Okay, their artworks often depicted moments of psychological tension or transformation. So they say that their paintings often showed important emotional elements. Okay, such as we can say inner conflict, maybe. Okay, and so they wanted people who looked at the paintings to basically reflect on the ethical and existential dimensions of the human experience. So they wanted people who look at the painting to think deeply about right and wrong, life's ka meaning, and the human's ka struggle. Okay, so basically they say that PRB kind of chose unusual stories. Okay, to explore deep human emotions and moral questions. Okay, counterculture we discussed here. Okay, list of allegories is you can call it as this stories which has a hidden moral or a symbolic meaning attached to it. Okay, so that is the case. Now let's see the last paragraph of the passage. Okay, so although the Brotherhood initially met with scorn from critics and the public alike, their influence gradually expanded. So at first, many critics and ordinary people did not like the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. Okay, they criticized and they kind of mocked them. Okay, but slowly more people started appreciating, okay, their ideas in art, and their influence grew. Later artists such as Edward Burney Jones and William Morris carry forward the pre-Raphaelite aesthetics and ideals, blending them into broader arts and crafts movement. Okay, so they say that this later artists such as this all right Edward and Morris. Okay, so they continued the styles and ideas of the pre-Raphaelites, and they mix ideas into a larger movement which is kind of called as the arts and a crafts movement. Okay, this movement, like the PRB, celebrated craftsmanship, nature, and the unity of beauty and utility values that stood in opposition to industrial mass production and aesthetic superficiality. Okay, so they say that the arts and craft movement. Okay, so just like this PRB, the art and crafts movement. Okay, they value handmade works. Okay, and they value nature. They love nature. Okay, and believe that useful things should also be beautiful. Okay, so they did not like this factory made goods that were produced in large amount. They also dislike art that looked nice on the surface but had no real depth or meaning. Okay, so basically they say that the PRB ideas initially were looked at the scorn, but later on it actually grew and inspired the arts and crafts movements. Okay, promoting handmade beauty or over industrial production. Okay, so basically we can see that this passage talks about the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. It is explaining about them, and then they say that they were not in favor of the traditional Victorian this. Okay, and then they say that PRB kind of we can say focus meticulously. Okay, and on to the details. That was the para number 2, I guess, right? Okay, and the third para talks about that PRB is kind of getting into promoting something. They were against promoting materialistic and industrialization. Okay, and then they say that they kind of pick up, which you can say is that unusual stories, and they want to explore deep emotions and moral questions. And at last, they say that the PRB actually inspires the arts and crafts. So this was the passage all about again telling you one of the form of the art, okay? And this is what you can actually expect in the humanities. So I hope you are able to get this passage, para. In case of is still any queries, you can ping us and WhatsApp. Okay. Thank you.